Yeah, welcome back to this second lecture. And I'll start by recapping what we discussed in the first lecture, which is in fact very succinctly summarized in the first para of the electrical machinery book of Fitzgerald Kingsley, which I like a lot. Uh, I'll just read it from there and you would see how beautifully it is summarized here. The role of electricity in modern technology is that of an extremely versatile intermediary. So, although energy is seldom directly available in electrical form and ultimately it is seldom wanted in electrical form, yet we often convert it to that form. In the electrical form, energy can be transmitted and controlled with relative simplicity, reliability, and efficiency. The electrical components then are a part of a system receiving input electrical energy in non-electrical form and ultimately delivering a non-electrical output. Thus, energy conversion devices are required at both ends of electrical system. Often their dynamic behavior has a predominant effect on performance of the system as a whole. I think this paragraph, the very first paragraph, summarizes the intent of this course also very well. But as it rightly says, you know what, it's a extreme electricity provides us a extremely versatile intermediary. So we are converting the mechanical energy, typically mechanical energy, uh, to electrical form through a generator, and that availability in the form of mechanical energy itself may be preceded by a heat to mechanical energy conversion, which is the boilers and the turbine system, which we will not discuss at all in this particular course, but is a very important part of power plant engineering or thermal engineering. Or in a hydro station, it would be probably from a reservoir which pumps the water down, and the speed that the water gains as it falls down is used on hydro turbines to create mechanical work, which is then converted into electrical form. And then I discussed the transformers briefly, long distance transmission, and then again finally at the back end we use motors to do convert this electrical energy back into the mechanical form. So that's the kind of thing that goes on here. And as I said, as is rightly said here, this can be done with relative simplicity. So one of the reasons why this is very popular is because we are able to do it with relative simplicity, reliability. See, whole of the mankind is now so much dependent on electricity. It is almost as important as breathing air or drinking water. So the reliability of it is, and we are able to deliver it with very high level of reliability. Just compare and contrast it with other forms of transportation like cars, scooters, main roads that you travel, where you have to deal with congestion and so on and so forth, and uh, fuels, emissions, pollution, noise. Uh, so the simplicity is not there. It's too complex. It's not reliable. There could be very high level of delays and efficiency. This whole transmission, as I told you in the last lecture, is it takes around 2% is the amount of losses. 2 to 3% is the amount of losses which is involved. So it is for this reason that we study. It is for this reason that we study electrical energy in a big way. And going forward, actually, if you look at it now, even the automobile engineering is converting into a electrical form. So earlier, at least you had this two-stroke and four-stroke heat engines, which were used in automobiles. But now what has happened uh, is that electrical vehicles have come in. In fact, if you look at some of the major electrical locomotives, the diesel engines, they were actually using electrical drives or DC machines only. The diesel engine would first have a generator, electrical generator, which will create a electrical power output, which would then be coupled to a DC machine, DC motor, and then that motor would be doing work. Or you could nowadays with AC traction, you could have, like you see AC locomotives, you could have a directly a variable frequency induction motor sitting there and doing work. So again, the control and the efficacy that is achieved with when the motor is in the electrical form far surpasses that of any mechanical fuel cycle, a mechanical two-stroke or a four-stroke kind of a engine. And now that has been miniaturized and also been brought in the electrical vehicle forms in the form of EVs, which are used for bikes and cars now. So the dependence is on the electricity is only growing. No, the whole of this story revolves around basically law of conservation of energy. And what does the law of conservation or the principle of the conservation of energy say? That energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It can, it is merely changed in form. So that's what happens in a thermal plant. First is a thermal or the fossil fuel energy, which is heat, stored heat, which is released as heat, converted into transferred to water, which is converted to superheated steam, which is then converted to mechanical form, which is the turbines rotating at a high speed, then converted into electrical form, which is the generator. In this, of course, a significant efficacy is lost in the process of heating and then converting it into high pressure steam, and which is released. But the mechanical conversion, the efficacy of the conversion of energy from mechanical energy to electrical energy is high, but from fossil fuel thermal energy to mechanical energy is low. So the overall process may be only 30% or so efficient. uh, on the other hand, however, converting from electrical to mechanical is quite efficient. Again, just like mechanical to electrical form is efficient, electrical to mechanical form, which is done by the motors, is also very efficient. One more small point that I want to add before we go further is that at these relatively low frequencies, 50 hertz or 60 hertz, electromagnetic radiation emission is negligible, and hence this is totally neglected. So what is happening now is that electrical input, let's say we are looking at a motor, then the electrical input from the electrical source is converted into mechanical energy output. Plus, what happens is there is a coupling medium in this whole story that we are discussing. There is a coupling medium, which is the magnetic field, and its and what's happening is this magnetic field is interacting with current which is flowing through a conductor. So their interaction creates force, which in turn creates movement, and in a rotational terms, a torque and an angular velocity. So that is the mechanical energy output. Plus this coupling medium, in this we will have an increase in the we could have an increase or change in the energy stored in the coupling field. And then finally, in transportation of electrical energy itself, there are resistive losses, right? We discussed, which are which are essentially converted as heat. So the point is, conversion to heat is irreversible. In the sense, if something gets converted to heat, we lose it. But other than that, conversion between the mechanical and electrical output is reversible. So the way I have written down here in the next slide is that the electrical energy input minus the resistance losses, okay, the I square R losses which are taking place in the wire, they are totally lost. So if you push electricity through wires up to your motor, for example, whatever goes in the wires is lost. So the electrical input minus the resistance losses is going to be equal to mechanical energy output plus friction and windage losses. Now friction, any mechanical element will have friction, and the friction will cause heating, and again that is a dissipative loss which you will never be able to get back. So that it's really loss means what is lost, and this is essentially friction and windage losses. Windage losses means when something rotates against the air, then the resistance to overcome that resistance is what is related to wind. The word comes from wind, and is increases as the velocity of rotation increases, causes what is known as windage losses, which again you cannot retrace back. So we want to minimize, always remember, these resistive losses, and we want to reduce using bearings and other things. We want to reduce the windage losses. So then electrical energy input minus the resistance losses is going to be equal to the mechanical energy output plus friction and windage losses. And then this, whatever is due to law of conservation of energy, if this is not equal to, if this is not equal to this, then where is the remaining thing gone? It's gone in increase in energy stored in the coupling field, which is the magnetic field. In our case, all our motors use magnetism to couple the rotational side and the electrical side. So the increase in the energy stored in the coupling field plus associated losses. What are the associated losses here? For example, hysteresis loss. The BH curve in a ferromagnetic material will not trace exactly the same path, and so uh, there would be a coupling loss which is associated with it. So let me show you, for example, here. um, okay, this is the magnetic, this is a iron material. It exhibits couple of important characteristics. One is saturation, second is hysteresis. So what I mean to say here is that when, for example, let's say I have a let's say that I have a winding like this made up of ferromagnetic material, say iron, and I push through it a DC current. Then, according to the right hand screw rule, the flux lines which will be created, the flux lines which will be created will be like this. Magnetic field flux lines which will be created are going to be like this. And now let us say that I connect a alternating voltage source or a current supply, source to this. So so if has n turns this has n turns, and if the average length of this magnetic path is L meters, everything is going to be in SI units or MKS units, then the magnetic field intensity H is going to be equal to Ni by L, which is its unit is also given to be ampere turns per meter. N is the number of turns, I is in amperes, and L is in meters. And this creates a magnetic field. Its unit is Tesla or Weber per meter square. Its unit is Tesla or Weber per meter square, and it looks like this. If it was just plain vacuum or air, if it was just plain vacuum or air, then what would happen is, uh, 1 minute. Yeah, so let me add a page. If it was just a plain vacuum or air, then what would happen is that this field will look like B is equal to mu 0 H, where mu 0 is your 4 pi, the constant of 4 pi into 10 to the uh, minus 7, the permeability of vacuum or air. In fact, if air is there in general, we tend to write this as B equal to mu 0 mu r H, because depending upon the medium that you use, the magnetic field can be enhanced. For example, in ferromagnetic materials, this mu r could be as high as, say, for example, 10,000. So here, if you recall, what is happening is that there are magnetic dipoles present in ferromagnetic materials, and in presence of H, in presence of H, they align in the direction and giving this multiplier effect of mu r equal to this. But this alignment, or this alignment will enhance uh, the the magnetic field significantly. But once all of them have aligned, then if you increase H further, no further improvement will happen, and hence we say that it reaches saturation. It reaches a level of saturation, the BH curve. In the BH curve, we say that we have hit a level of saturation when the incremental H will create, when the incremental H will create only an incremental B, according to as if you are working in vacuum or air. So that's why the BH curve, that's why the BH curve to begin with is shown to, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, the curve figure has, array, what's happening? Hey, last time. So the BH curve, this figure has not come out very well, but it's okay. The BH curve will tend to saturate in these regions. You know, this is where its slope is uh, mu 0. Here it is increasing with, say, mu r of 1000 or 10,000 or so. Somewhere it gradually flattens out. usually somewhere it starts flattening out. That point is known as a knee point, and then it flattens out. So the importance of iron or ferromagnetic material keeps reducing. Now, uh, all our motors and generators use this ferromagnetic material or iron significantly because it provides a very low resistance path for or a very efficient medium for to set up the magnetic field in the air gap where the actual interaction takes place. So now this is the BH curve uh, considering saturation aspect. But actual BH curve looks even different like this. There is a hysteresis effect. What it means to say is when I started applying the current here, there was already a remnant magnetic field due to some partial alignment of the dipoles coming from the previous history of the magnetic material. As I increased the edge, the dipoles became more and more aligned, and they became totally aligned here at this point of time. And then this current started reversing the V by R because I have put a alternating current here. It reached a maximum value here and then start reversing. So as it starts reversing, and when the current becomes zero, when the current becomes zero, a residual magnetism is seen here. And then as I reduce the current at this point, what happens is, at this point, what happens is that the B becomes zero, and B becomes zero means now they have totally lost the alignment, and they have become completely random. The dipoles have become completely random here, and to demagnetize that, I had to apply a negative H, and then as I further apply the magnetic field in the opposite direction, the grains will start aligning in the opposite direction, and I'll reach some point here, after which again my current has reduced changed the direction. So the current starts, rather not yet change the direction, but starts reducing, and you will see trace a trajectory like this. So this loop, this loop is called the hysteresis loop. This loop is called the hysteresis loop. And see, these dipoles are rubbing against each other in some sense, and therefore as they are rubbing against each other and tracing this kind of a trajectory, a loss is entailed in this physical movement, uh, which depends upon the integral of BH dV. A loss is incurred in this whole process in the magnetic medium, which is again lost as heat, so it is irreversible. And this loss is called as hysteresis loss. So this loss is called as hysteresis loss. So which this is the loss which I talked of here. The increase in the energy stored in the magnetic field plus associated losses. There is one more loss which is known as eddy current loss, which I will come and discuss. I'll come back and discuss soon. So now what is happening here is, in our electrical system, now let's come back to this diagram which I have shown here, that you have a electrical system, all right. Now this electrical energy is going to be finally converted into mechanical energy. We are discussing a motor here. Now, in between, what is happening between this electrical system and this mechanical system is that, first of all, there is some heat loss, heat or loss due to the resistive effect, or the heat loss due to I square R losses in the wires itself, which we need to take out. Then we actually come to the coupling medium, which is the magnetic medium we hit at that level. And our interaction from between the electrical energy and the magnetic energy is through a reactionary, is basically through a reactionary medium or force, or something like a force, which is which manifests as the induced EMF E. So what happens is, this magnetic medium, when it reacts to the electrical medium, it reacts by creating an induced EMF E, which is going to be the terminal voltage Vt minus I of R. And then here in this coupling field, this electrical energy is being pushed into it. It reacts through this electro EMF or electromotive force, and in the interaction that I showed you about, which happens in the magnetic field, there are heat lost due to the field losses. Plus, actually, there is eddy current loss also, not only hysteresis, but I will come to that. And this will be this will be traced how many times in a cycle? 50, in a 50 hertz system, this will, or 50 cycles per second system, this will be traced 50 times uh, every second. Then we have a current carrying conductor which is going to interact with this in the with the magnetic field which has been set up, and create rotation, which is what is the mechanical output seen by this. And in this mechanical system, there would be some loss due to windage and frictional losses. So these are the losses which are going to happen in in this system. Okay. So what now I am trying to say here is that uh, we are going to have uh, we can write that if this dw, a small delta w electrical, is the work which is inputted from the electrical system here, then this is nothing but equal to V times of the terminal voltage Vt times of I dt minus I square R dt. Am I right? See, this is the Vt, the terminal. Vt times I becomes the power. Power times dt, the power times dt becomes the electrical energy input to this system here, to this system here. Now something is going to be lost in the resistor. So what is the power loss in the resistor? I square R, and then multiply by dt, then that's the incremental loss. So this is the this is the dw elect is what comes here to the coupling field. And so you can write this as Vt minus IR times of I times of dt. So this is what you are going to write this. And for voltages to balance properly, this should be equal to your induced EMF E. So therefore, your induced EMF E is going to be equal to Vt minus of IR, and we can therefore write the equation as the electrical energy input to our coupling field is going to be equal to EI dt. Now just remember what is E, unit of E is volts. What is 1 volt? 1 volt is 1 joule per coulomb. And what is 1 ampere? 1 ampere is 1 coulomb per second. So what is effectively 1 volt ampere is effectively unit wise it is 1 joule per second, which is same as 1 watt. So that's why every time we write V into I, we say that it is we say that it is power, which is joules per second. So if you want to get work done in joules, you will multiply it by dt, and then to get the cumulative work, you will have to integrate it further. So therefore, here what we are having is dW electrical is equal to EI dt, and this is going to be equal to what? This is going to be equal to the change in the stored field energy plus the normal tendency of that stored energy is to release as work, and hence dW mechanical. See, this natural tendency to do work is, or not just to remain there as stored field energy, is why we make such devices out of electromechanical systems. So this equation is a very important equation and will play a major role even in our future discussions. All right. The dW electrical is equal to, which is the input, which is equal to induced EMF E into I dt, is equal to the change, incremental change in the stored energy, field energy, plus the mechanical incremental mechanical work which is being done. Okay. Now let's quickly also look at the Faraday's law. So what does the Faraday's law say that? Um, actually, Faraday's law, you can think of it directly in terms of Maxwell's field equations itself. According to Maxwell's field equation, an electric field is induced by time varying magnetic field, and Faraday's laws of electromagnetic induction, they are more historical. They precede Maxwell's generalization. So Maxwell basically gave a generalization, and they are equivalent statement applied to the circuits. So Faraday's law, based on experimental evidence, states that an EMF is induced in an electrical circuit whenever the magnetic flux linking the circuit changes. And this EMF is proportional to what? The EMF is proportional to time rate of change of the flux linkage, and in our SI units it is simply E is equal to d psi by dt. The in the SI units or MKS units, it comes out, proportionality constant itself comes out to be 1. And according to Lenz's law, so these Faraday's law and Lenz's law are very critical in this course. According to Lenz's law, its direction is such so as to tend to induce a current which would prevent the flux from changing. So it's the change which is opposed. So in fact, I feel sometimes like drawing an analogy to inertial system here, because it's the change, even in F is equal to ma kind of a relationship where you have force, the mass represents what? Opposition to the change in the velocity. Similarly here, uh, here what we are having is an induced EMF which is proportional to rate of change of flux, and according to Lenz's law, the direction of this induced EMF is to is such so as to prevent the flux from changing. Okay. So now let me come to this particular figure I have drawn here. I have a source V here. There is a resistance, and then there is this ferromagnetic core on which I have a winding installed as shown here. Now, since the current is, if I take a right-handed screw and see that the current is going to form a clockwise loop, and the tip of the right-handed screw moves forward, then I can see that the flux which is going to be set up here is going to follow the direction as is shown here. Now we use phi for flux and lambda for flux linkages, and lambda is equal to n phi. N phi, the number, that's the number of turns, is essentially giving a multiplier effect while calculating the, so the EMF induced per turn, is going to be d phi by dt. I'll come to sign plus or minus later on, but the EMF induced per turn is d phi by dt. And since there are n turns connected in additive form, the n terms connected in additive form, so therefore the net EMF E across the winding, this is for turn, this is for coil or winding, is going to be n times of d phi by dt. The term winding comes from the fact that something is wound on the core. From there that term winding comes. And coil indicates a circular thing which closes on to itself. So this n phi is nothing but written as d psi, and then you get EMF equal to d psi by dt. In circuits, we usually associate a inductance with it, because if you recall this thing here which I drew here, as the H increases, so does the B. So more the current I push, what is H here? H here is Ni by L, unit being amperes per meter, and B is, so therefore mu 0 mu r Ni by L. And what is the flux? Flux is B times of area of cross section. If I have a area of cross section here A, then B is, flux is nothing but B times of A, which is nothing but mu 0 mu r A by L n times of I. So therefore the flux is nothing but flux which is, whose unit is Webers, is going to be equal to this, and the flux linkage lambda, which is n times of phi, is going to be equal to n square, n times this n gives me n square mu 0 mu r A by L times of I, and this ratio lambda by I for such simple geometries, so nicely it has come out, is going to be equal to mu 0 mu r A by L, which is a constant which depends only upon the material used and its geometry given by A and the L. This is called as the self-inductance or inductance of the coil or winding, and its unit is going to be Henry. So this is important to note that, therefore we say that lambda is equal to n phi is equal to inductance times the current, and the unit of inductance is named after Henry, and uh, is very important because once you know the inductance, you don't need to uh, really know all the geometry of it, and you don't need to know all the details. So in some sense, you can recall a simile to resistance being equal to uh, rho times of L by A. Once you know the resistance, you don't, even if you don't, this is the resistance of a wire, you don't need to know the specifics of the conductor, you don't need to know the specifics of this geometry. Everything all is encompassed into one circuit element called resistance. Similarly, for magnetism, one circuit element called the inductance will capture whole of this story succinctly for us. Now, what does the Faraday's law say? Faraday's law says that E is nothing but proportional to d psi by dt, and in our SI unit, this proportionality constant is 1. Now, the only question is, what sign should I use here? Should I use here as plus or minus? This is a matter of convention here, and throughout this course, I am going to use this plus sign. So carefully see, analyze this circuit now that I have written here on the right hand side. I have this V the source voltage minus the drop ER, which impinges onto this voltage impinges onto this coil here as E. Now this current is increasing, so the flux is, if I close, if you imagine a switch here which I have closed, then the current is increasing. As the current is increasing, the flux is tending to increase in this coil, and the and the Lenz law says, Faraday's law says that the EMF is going to be proportional to this rate of change, which is d psi by dt, and the Lenz law says that its direction should be such so as to oppose the change. So therefore, if the current is being pushed inside, the induced EMF has to be generated in such a way that it will try to push the current in the opposite direction in the resistor. So therefore, this should be plus and this should be minus. So if this is plus and this is minus, and this is written as the induced EMF E, then this induced EMF E is positive and equal to d psi by dt, and therefore a plus sign is used here. On the other hand, if, and I am going to write this in a very light letter, if I had written this convention as minus, this as plus, and written a E here in this particular way, then I would have to use a minus sign here. So I'm not going to do that convention. I am going to follow this convention that I have already figured out which way the opposite to, for the current to flow in the for current to be in a opposition manner. So this current is setting the flux in the magnetic coil. The current tends to increase, the flux tends to increase. The induced EMF should therefore try to oppose the current. In other words, try to push the current in the opposite direction like this. To do that, this side should be positive and this side should be negative. If this is what is called as EMF E, then the EMF E will be positive, and the d psi by dt is also positive, and hence a plus sign should be used here. Now, this is the convention that we are going to follow in circuits course, and this is the convention that we are going to follow in this course. So V is equal to Li. If our geometry is not changing, then L is constant, and so d psi by dt will become equal to L di by dt, and hence we get V is equal to E is equal to L di by dt, and the circuit equation can be written here as V is equal to Ri plus E, which is V is equal to Ri plus L di by dt. So I think I'm going to break here and I'll start with an introduction to the basic synchronous generator in the next class. Thank you.